Welcome to the May 2025 Sidereal forecast. I'm Gary O'Toole, and this is Timeline Astrology. So the Sun is moving through Sidereal Aries for the first half of the month and then moves into Taurus. And then on May 6th, Mercury moves into Aries. So we're having a lot more Aries energy going on in May. And this is somewhat mixed bag because Mars, which rules Aries, is in Cancer in debilitation, opposing Pluto in Capricorn. Therefore, Pluto Capricorn is squaring the Sun in Aries. So it's quite tense in many ways. And although there are some sweet spots in the month of May and in the year of 2025, I believe the sweetest spot, it is still quite volatile and aggressive. And we will likely see more aggressive acts, more attacks, unfortunately, in May. Things are really heating up, and especially into June and July when Mars then meets with the south node of the moon in Leo, in another fire sign. So we have to be mindful of this. We have to be mindful of Mercury and Aries in our communication, obviously. When we're feeling frustrated with Mars and Cancer opposing Pluto, we could easily lash out, overreact to a perceived threat, and say the thing that we later regret. One of the sweeter spots is the fact that once Mercury moves into Aries by May 6th, it leaves Venus behind in Pisces in exaltation, and truly in exaltation at this point, because since the end of January, Venus has been in one way or the other not as exalted as it might seem. It's, of course, in Pisces, which is exalted, but it then went retrograde, which behaved as if it's debilitated, which led to the stock market crash. And then it conjoined Saturn and then Rahu and Neptune, and it was just all confused, very up and down. Now, in May, we have Venus pulling away from Saturn, Rahu, and Neptune, and then Mercury pulling away from Venus. And again, Venus can now enjoy its exaltation. The full moon is on May 12th. It's on the cusp of Libra and Scorpio in the lunar mansion called Vishaka. Vishaka means two-branched, and it's what we think about when we think about Libra, the scales of Libra, the weighing of the pros and cons, the deciding on, and sometimes maybe not deciding on when we have two options. But it does ultimately lead to a decision and then a dedication to a certain path. And that is how Libra becomes Scorpio. And then when we move into Scorpio, when the moon moves into Scorpio, we get not only devoted to that path, but we get obsessed about that path. So we have to be mindful of this journey, of course, but we have to start the journey. We have to choose. There is some positive indications for this new moon because the moon is opposing Mercury in Aries, and Mercury in Aries is flanked either side by Venus and Jupiter, which means that all three benefics, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter, are opposite. This is a more positive indication despite Mars's debilitation and aspect. The big news in May is that Jupiter is moving signs, moving into sidereal Gemini on May 14th. And it will whiz through the sign in 5 months, and by October 18th, it will move into Cancer. It will return, of course, though, because it's going to move so fast, it's going to return to Gemini by December 6th until the 1st of June 2026. So all in all, it's going to spend a year in Gemini, but it's just initially a very brief visit and likely a sort of quick stop through the details and skipping over many of the details that we'll have to go back over again by the end of the year into next year. So considering where this is happening in your chart, consider what is it that you're skipping over? What details are you skipping over with this initial burst of energy and enthusiasm and lots of information and lots of this and that going on in Gemini? Too much information, of course, doesn't necessarily lead to clarity. It just leads to too much information, lots of debates. But again, once it goes back and it slows down, retrogrades, goes back into Gemini, it's then that it's going to really focus on those details to get them right. So on May 14th, we also have the nodes of the moon move signs. If we use the mean node calculation, the traditional calculation, they don't move until May 29th, according to the true node. But essentially, with the north node Rahu moving into Aquarius and the south node Ketu moving into Leo, we have this sort of imbalance now going on within the world in terms of leadership and the people. And likely, we're going to see more revolutions and uprisings and protests against leadership, with Rahu in Aquarius fueling these revolutions and Jupiter moving into Gemini, aspecting Aquarius and Rahu, fueling those revolutions with more hope and idealism for something better, with Ketu then in Leo rejecting leaders. And so, of course, we're going to experience this transit in our own unique way in our own lives as we make changes in our own lives. But in the world over, we're going to see this as a big theme moving forward for the next year and a half. Also, on May 14th, we have the Sun move into Sidereal Taurus. Now the sun is meeting with Uranus, which is getting settled into, if that's even a phrase we could use for Uranus and Taurus. Because Uranus and Taurus is uprooting the whole financial system with all of these trade wars and all of the supply chain issues, the recent blackouts, for example, in the power grid in Spain and Portugal. These are examples of Uranus upsetting Taurus. And now we have the sun move into Taurus, highlighting that theme in our life, and we're going to be really focused on that for the next month. What are the things that make us feel safe and secure? And that includes food, money, power supply, fuel, all of these things that we take for granted a lot of the time. But with Uranus and Taurus for the next 7 years, in fact, it's just moved in here, we can no longer take any of those things for granted. So when you see blackouts, like major blackouts in a whole country like Spain, like the size of Spain, you realize actually that all of this is just not a given. We have to appreciate. That's another big theme coming in here again, remember, with Venus in exaltation in Pisces, we have to appreciate what we have while we have it. Another big thing that's happening in May is that all of the planets, the visible planets at least, are on one side of the lunar nodes. And this is occurring really from the end of April until the end of July. And every couple of weeks, it occurs when the moon joins the visible planets. The moon will break this combination every 2 weeks, but we have this combination or yoga called Kal Sarpa. Kal Sarpa means the serpent of time. Essentially, the lunar nodes, Rahu and Ketu, are the serpent. It just shows this kind of slippery, unpredictable energy, this kind of shifting around in the background of our awareness, an unconscious need that we have collectively and individually to make some changes in our life. And when we have this kind of combination, as we will have from the end of April to the end of July, everything feels like it's shifting around and changing in bigger ways. Initially, maybe more subtle, and then eventually in more obvious ways. Then on May 23rd, we have Mercury move into Taurus, a steadier position for Mercury for sure. But again, it's meeting with Uranus. And again, we're talking about these issues around trade wars and supply and the economy and money. And Mercury itself, being the planet of trade and business, is likely to maybe show some upset here, maybe show a bit of a jolt to the system again with Uranus activated again in Taurus. And so we have to be mindful of that, even though overall Mercury in Taurus is a steadier time for the mind to focus on tangible, enjoyable, comfortable things in our life. On May 27th, we have the new moon in Taurus in the lunar mansion called Rohini, which is the moon's favorite in Vedic myth. Of the 27 wives, the moon has 27 wives, the 27 lunar mansions. Rohini was his favorite. And it literally stays in Rohini a fraction of a time longer than any of the others, which is fascinating, the fact that they have that encoded in myth in ancient India. But at any rate, the moon in Rohini is enjoyable. It's tangible wealth, refinement. It's about enjoying the finer things of life. It's about building something sustainable and comfortable. It's symbolized by a chariot, which in our modern context would be the most comfortable car you could buy. That is Rohini. And this new moon in exaltation in Rohini is likely to be a month of enjoyment coming up from the end of May onwards. Doesn't mean that there aren't complexities for this month coming up with all of the other transits going on. Of course, there are always a mixed bag. And the Kalsarpa imbalance in the chart as well with all the planets on one side of the lunar nodes. But still, there are some things to enjoy for this new lunar month for sure. Then, by the end of the month on May 31st, Venus then leaves its exaltation. So, all of this time, and during that new moon on the 27th, we have the planet Venus, which rules the new moon, exalted in a very powerful position to appreciate and to enjoy whatever it is we have to appreciate. But then on the 31st of May, we have Venus move into Aries. Aries and Venus don't go hand in hand. Aries is Mars' sign. Mars is debilitated now and almost exactly debilitated at this stage before it moves into Leo by June 6th. So from the end of May into the beginning of June, that first week of June especially, is quite a volatile time. And for Venus to be thrown into Aries during this time, in other words, the planet of peace and harmony to be thrown into the fire of Aries, with Mars so debilitated and frustrated and annoyed and lashing out, it's likely to lead to some problems in peace negotiations and in wars around the world. So we have to be mindful of this, of course, in the world, but also in our personal lives, how we manage this energy of Venus in Aries. Venus in Aries is more of a go-getter, going for the things that we enjoy. It's not necessarily as considerate, perhaps, and or appreciative, but it is certainly potentially more passionate and again more of a go-getter. Go for the things that you want. Maybe not consider everybody else in getting what you want and just go for it. So to finish, I want to just mention that in June we have, I think, and July, the most volatile phase of 2025. And you're thinking, well, more volatile? Yes, unfortunately, because Mars is about to move into Leo, a fire sign, and conjoin Ketu, which has just moved into Leo. Mars and Ketu conjoined in any sign is volatile. In a fire sign, even more so. The last time they came together was in October 2023, and we saw what happened then, another war. This time, it may be, again, more fighting, more wars, but it may also be an economic issue because it's quite often we see these combine to create stock market issues. So whether it's a crash, a major crash, or another wobble in the market, I don't know. It could also be an attack somewhere that also leads to some issues in the markets. But whatever it is, whatever event, whether a natural or man-made event, because it could also be a natural disaster, this is volatile and dangerous. Now, of course, it's not dangerous for everybody. Your chart would have to be activated in such a way that it's really showing this in your chart. It's only certain people that are going to be impacted by this conjunction in a big way. But in the world, in another way, collectively, we're going to see a major event happen in June and July that changes the story completely. And with Mars and Ketu conjoined in Leo, Mars is aspecting Saturn, which is now conjoined Neptune, almost by degree. You pretty much can say it's by degree, not by minute, but certainly the same degree. Saturn and Neptune are conjoined in Pisces, and Mars is looking on. This, for me, shows that there's some instability in the world from June through some big attack or big event or catastrophic event, maybe natural or man-made, whatever it might be, whether stock market event, whatever it is, it's very destabilizing in June, July. So that's something to look forward to. If you can look forward to that, that's something to be mindful of for sure in the coming weeks. So that is the month of May. It's certainly a mixed bag. It's certainly quite volatile, but also quite passionate. And there's a lot to appreciate here, despite the volatility, maybe in spite of all of the volatility, when we look at the things in our life that we have to appreciate. So hope that's been of help. As always, I wish you the very best for the month ahead. If you would like a more in-depth forecast for your sign, consider signing up as a patron at patreon.com/timeline astrology. I offer more in-depth astrology there on a weekly basis and also, again, a sign-based forecast for your sign, rising or moon sign. So, wishing you all the best and until next time.